Today is May 1st, 2026, and I want to tell you why this specific date matters more than anything else that happened in this conflict this week. Not the gas price, though $4.30 per gallon confirmed by CNN this morning is itself a story. Not Putin meeting Araghchi in St. Petersburg and publicly praising Iranian courage, though that too is significant and I will address it. Not Trump's plan to extend the blockade, not Hezbollah's drone strike that killed an Israeli soldier today. Today matters because of a law passed by the United States Congress in 1973, a law designed to prevent exactly the situation that exists right now, and a law whose 60-day clock started the moment the first American bomb fell on Iran on February 28th has just expired. The War Powers Resolution. And with its expiration today, Congress has acquired the specific legal authority to force the President of the United States to end this war.
Iran has known this was coming since day one, and today it arrived. What the War Powers Resolution actually gives Congress today. Let me be precise because I think the next few hours of coverage will be imprecise about what the law actually says and what it actually enables. The War Powers Resolution was passed in 1973 over President Nixon's veto in the aftermath of Vietnam. Its core provision, Section 5B, states that when the president introduces forces into hostilities without a formal declaration of war or specific congressional authorization, those forces must be withdrawn within 60 days unless Congress acts to authorize the engagement. Today is day 62 from February 28th. The 60-day window has closed. What this gives Congress is a specific mechanism, a concurrent resolution, not subject to presidential veto, that can direct the president to remove American forces from the conflict. A concurrent resolution requires a majority in both chambers. It does not need the president's signature. It cannot be vetoed. Now let me address the Trump administration's response directly. Defense Secretary Hegseth told Congress today that the war powers clock does not apply because the ceasefire of April 8th means American forces are not actively engaged in hostilities. This argument has a legal weakness so large that any first year law student would identify it. The blockade did not end with the ceasefire. American warships are still boarding Iranian vessels. American naval assets are actively preventing Iranian ships from accessing Iranian ports. American forces still have shoot to kill orders for mine laying boats. The question of whether an active naval blockade with live fire orders constitutes hostilities is not resolved by pointing to a ceasefire paper. It is a question Congress can now force the courts to answer, and the administration knows it. Why Iran has been counting this clock since February 28th. This is the dimension of today's deadline that I think the Western coverage is missing almost entirely. Iran did not enter this conflict without understanding American constitutional law. Iranian diplomats have studied in the United States. Iranian lawyers understand the War Powers Resolution. Iranian strategic planners have been tracking its application to every American military deployment since 1973, and they understood the moment the first American bomb fell on February 28th that the president had 60 days before Congress acquired this specific legal instrument. This is why Iran's diplomatic strategy has been sequenced the way it has. The Araghchi tour, Islamabad, Muscat, Moscow, Islamabad again, was not random movement. It was a four-country diplomatic offensive timed to mature precisely around the war powers deadline. The staged framework proposal, Hormuz restrictions lifted by both sides, nuclear question deferred, was submitted through Pakistani mediators precisely as the deadline approached. The improved offer that Trump described as much better arrived within 10 minutes of his Truth Social cancellation. Iran has been managing two parallel tracks simultaneously for 62 days. The military track, the IRGC maintaining operational control of Hormuz, seizing ships, laying mines, and the diplomatic track, Araghchi, building the international architecture for a settlement through Pakistan, Oman, Moscow, and now the war powers deadline that changes the domestic American political cost of continuing. Today, the diplomatic track gained a new instrument, and Iran knew it was coming. Putin praised Iran's courage today. Here is why that matters specifically. On the same day the war powers deadline hits, Putin met Araghchi in St. Petersburg and publicly praised Iranian courage. I want to explain why the timing of this specific meeting matters. Russia did not choose May 1st for Araghchi's Moscow visit accidentally. Putin's public praise for Iranian courage on the day the war powers clock expires, 2 weeks before Trump flies to Beijing, is a diplomatic signal directed at multiple audiences simultaneously. To Iran's domestic audience, Russia stands with Iran on the most legally consequential day of the conflict. The supreme leader's legitimacy, which depends in part on the narrative that Iran is not isolated in resisting American pressure, is reinforced by Putin's public statement. To America's congressional audience, the party that holds the uranium custodianship offer, the solution to the deal's most technically difficult problem, is publicly aligned with Iran on the day Congress acquires the power to end the war. Any congressional resolution to force the war's end will be negotiated in a context where Russia is visibly supportive of Iran's position. To Beijing specifically, Trump flies to meet Xi on May 14th and 15th, 13 days from today. Putin's praise for Iran on the war powers deadline day is a message to Xi. Russia and China have been comparing notes since Araghchi's St. Petersburg meeting. When Trump arrives in Beijing, Xi will have been briefed by Putin on Iran's full position. The war powers deadline is part of that briefing. The domestic American political cost of continuing, now augmented by Congress's new legal authorities, is part of that briefing. Putin did not choose today accidentally. Nothing in this diplomatic environment happens accidentally. The convergence of deadlines that America is now managing, I want to explain why May 1st is the most consequential single day in this conflict's diplomatic arc. Because three separate deadlines are now converging simultaneously, and their convergence creates a pressure that America has not faced at any previous point in the last 62 days. The first is the war powers deadline. Today, Congress can now act. Whether it will is a different question, and I do not claim certainty about congressional politics, but the instrument is available, and its availability changes the domestic American calculation about the cost of continuing. The second is the Beijing summit, May 14th and 15th, 13 days from today. Trump will sit across from Xi, having inherited a war powers crisis at home, a 4.30 gas price that is feeding into consumer confidence and inflation numbers, and a military blockade that his own defense secretary is arguing in Congress does not require authorization. Xi will know all of this. Russia will have told him. The war powers deadline is American domestic political context that Xi will be factoring into every conversation at the summit. The third is the Hajj season, late May. Saudi Arabia, which is the most important mediating power in any Gulf settlement, will have its diplomatic and logistical bandwidth consumed by Hajj in late May. Millions of pilgrims from across the Muslim world, including Iran, will travel to Mecca. Any escalation during the Hajj season carries specific costs for Saudi Arabia that make it less likely to support continued American pressure. Any military action that disrupts Hajj pilgrimage routes, that affects Saudi Arabia's management of the holy sites, that forces Riyadh to choose between its obligations to the Islamic world and its alignment with American strategy, that action carries a cost that Saudi Arabia is not willing to absorb. Al Jazeera reported specifically that Riyadh's diplomatic and logistical bandwidth will be constrained during Hajj, making any escalation during that period particularly costly for the regional coalition that America has been trying to maintain. Iran knows this. Iran has always known this. The Hajj season is a built-in constraint on American military escalation that operates independently of the war powers resolution and independently of the Beijing summit. It is a third deadline that compounds the first two. The window for a diplomatic settlement before the Hajj constraint tightens is approximately the next 3 weeks, between today and when Hajj preparations consume Riyadh's attention. 3 deadlines: war powers today, Beijing in 13 days, Hajj in approximately 4 weeks. Iran has known about all 3 since before the war began. America is now inside all 3 simultaneously. And $4.30 gas is the daily reminder to every American voter that the clock is running on all 3 at once. What comes next? The 3 things to watch. I want to close with specific things worth watching in the next 72 hours, because the convergence of today's deadlines means the next 3 days will be unusually important. First, whether any congressional resolution is introduced. A concurrent resolution invoking war powers does not need to pass to matter. Its introduction by even a single member of the House or Senate creates a public legal record that the administration must respond to. That response shapes the domestic political narrative. Watch for congressional statements today and tomorrow. Second, what the oil price does. Gas at 4.30, Brent crude at $120. If the oil price moves significantly in either direction in the next 72 hours, it will tell you whether the war powers deadline is being priced as a real constraint or as political noise. Oil dropping means traders believe the deadline creates genuine pressure toward a deal. Oil holding or rising means traders believe the administration will find legal cover to continue. Third, what comes out of the Beijing preparation. Putin praised Iran today. She will be briefed in the next 13 days. Watch whether China says anything publicly about the war powers deadline, because if Beijing comments on American constitutional law in relation to this conflict, it means the deadline has become a diplomatic instrument that China is actively using in its summit preparation. Today is May 1st. The war powers deadline has arrived. Putin praised Iran's courage in St. Petersburg. Gas is 4.30 per gallon. Congress has a new legal instrument it has never had before in this conflict. And Iran has been counting toward this day since February 28th. America is now inside three converging deadlines simultaneously. The war powers clock expired today. The Beijing summit is in 13 days. The Hajj season tightens in 4 weeks. Every day that passes without a deal is another day inside all three at once. Iran designed its diplomatic strategy around exactly this convergence. The question is whether Washington has understood that the calendar is no longer on its side. Trump flies to Beijing in 13 days. Watch what he says about the war powers resolution before he boards that plane, because how he handles today's deadline will tell you everything about whether he arrives in Beijing with a strategy or with a social media post.